You are listening to the Climate Alarm Clock podcast. This is part 4 of episode 4. And I'm delighted that we are starting a collaboration with Birdwatch Ireland where they talk about an endangered bird and the work that's been done to protect them. In light of the chats we had in episode 1, both about the Citizens' Assembly on biodiversity and indeed about our bogs and turf, this first feature seems really apt. I'm going to hand over to Niall Hatch and first Ricky Whelan to find out a bit about the curlew.
Hi Niall, so we're talking about curlew here today, and the one of our biggest waders in the country and a fine species. Tell me about them.
Yeah, a really iconic bird, and a bird that I suppose a few decades ago we wouldn't have had to describe to anyone. Everyone would know the curlew. A large brown bird, long legs like many waders, but probably the most distinctive thing about them is they have this extremely long down curving beak, which they use to probe into mud and other substrates to try and find invertebrates. They eat all sorts of different kind of aquatic worms and small crustaceans and mollusks and things like that. And a species though that although in the winter you find them around mostly coastal areas, estuaries and mudflats and so on, as a breeding bird they tend to be in the boglands and in the uplands. It's a bird of real wilderness, and it's a bird that we in Birdwatch Ireland are extremely concerned about because the figures for this are absolutely shocking. We've seen this bird decline from being common and abundant all across Ireland to being now on the brink of extinction. Actually could go extinct completely as a breeding species in Ireland within the next decade unless urgent action is taken and it works.
Absolutely, no, and it's frightening, and the reasons for that decline are sort of, it's death by a thousand cuts in many ways. You hear agriculture intensification is a big thing. That includes sort of the drainage, that's the drainage of our bogs and our wetlands, disturbance, all sorts of reasons, and it's a really grim outlook for them.
It really is, Ricky, unfortunately. I mean, this is a bird we know, especially when it's breeding, that is very sensitive to human disturbance. So if there's any kind of incursion into its breeding territory, that's a big problem for them. We've also seen issues with things like afforestation, like with spruce plantations in bogland areas, which, for too long in Ireland we're seen almost as waste ground rather than the absolutely wonderful climate sinks and havens of biodiversity that they actually are. I mean, the bogs of Ireland are rainforests. That's what they are. And with the curlew, they're particularly sensitive because they need very large breeding territories. And if those become fragmented or broken up by forestry plantations, it means that the curlews just can't survive there. But also what those plantations do is they allow predators such as crows and pine martens to get a hold in an area, and then because the curlews nest on the ground, the eggs and the chicks are easy targets for these predators. So it's not the fault of the predators, of course, it's the fault of us humans for letting the populations of these birds get so low that now a predator can wipe them out. But we have a responsibility to take action here, and I know that one of the main things that we in Birdwatch Ireland are doing, we're heavily involved in a project called the Curlew EIP, a European funded project to try and trial methods to save these birds and see if that can be extrapolated and rolled out elsewhere in Ireland, and indeed hopefully elsewhere in the world, because this is a species that globally is doing very poorly, not just in Ireland.
Absolutely, and a few years ago the curlew task force was set up with sort of, people say there's very limited effectiveness so far, but the willing was there, a lot of collaboration, and these EIP projects are working very hard to get landowners and farmers and local communities involved at the sort of sharp end to protect these areas and protect the habitats and the curlew. So hopefully going forward, and there's all the extra challenges now of climate change, which involves stuff like spring floods, which affects our ground nesting birds like curlew and stuff like that. So it's really challenging for curlew looking ahead.
It is, and we also see then with the wintering birds as well, we're seeing problems with the migrant curlews that come here, climate change affecting them when they're migrating here, make unsettled weather patterns, make feeding less certain for them. So let's hope we can turn the tide for this bird and make sure that the curlew can survive for future generations to enjoy.
Well, certainly there's lots of effort going towards it, so hopefully we can turn the tide, and things will look up for curlew in the future.
That was Ricky Whelan and Niall Hatch there. They have a great podcast themselves called In Your Nature if you want to learn more about birds and Birdwatch Ireland. Coming up in part 5 of the Climate Alarm Clock podcast, I chat to Pádraig Fogarty from the Irish Wildlife Trust.